nationwide block against President Donald Trump's executive order seeking to end birthright citizenship. Tyrone Bowman, live. Welcome to the program. Let's get the conversation started. According to CNN, the ruling from U.S. District Judge Joseph LaPlante is significant because the Supreme Court last month curbed the power of lower court judges to issue nationwide injunctions, while keeping intact the ability of plaintiffs to see widespread block of the order through class action lawsuits, which is what happened Thursday in New Hampshire. Ruling from the bench, LaPlante granted a request from immigration rights authorities to certify a nationwide class that, quote, will be comprised only of those deprived of citizenship, end quote, and issued a preliminary injunction indefinitely, blocking Trump's Day 1 order from being enforced against any baby born after February 20. The preliminary injunction is not just a close call to the court, LaPlante said during a hearing. The deprivation of U.S. citizenship and an abrupt change of policy that was long-standing, that's irreparable, quote, end quote. U.S. citizenship, the judge added, is the greatest privilege that exists in the world. The judge, an appointee of former President George W. Bush, a Republican, and the judge is a Republican, said he would pause his order for several days to give the Trump administration time to appeal his decision. LaPlante issued a written 38-page order last Thursday as well. LaPlante wrote that he, quote, has no difficulty concluding that rapid adoption by executive order without legislation and the attendant national debate of a new government policy of highly questionable constitutionality that would deny citizenship to many thousands of individuals previously granted citizenship under an indisputable, long-standing policy, continues irreparable harm, and that all representatives could suffer irreparable harm absent an injunction, end quote. Because, well, I reserve my opinion till later on. LaPlante's ruling could prove to be a critical bulwark against Trump's policy as other courts scramble to take a second look at their decisions in light of the Supreme Court's ruling. In February, LaPlante indefinitely blocked the Trump administration from enforcing the order only against members of several nonprofit groups who would have been impacted by it. Quote, I'm the judge who wasn't comfortable with issuing a nationwide injunction. Class action is different. The judge said at one point during Thursday's hearing, the Supreme Court suggested class action is a better option, quote, close quote. In his ruling earlier this year, LaPlante said Trump's order contradicts the text of the 14th Amendment and the century-old untouched precedent that interprets it. Let me just say this here, because I've had a chance to extensively read the whole architectural argument of Project 2025. And I'm here to tell you that what's written in this thing in its entirety, these are the thoughts, the writings, and the conclusions of some extremely racist, bigoted people who wrote this entire crap. They don't want anyone in this country if they're not Anglo-Saxon or of the hue of their complexion. They don't even want people who were born here naturally to remain in this country if they feel as though they don't have the right to be here. And that is problematic in the sense that if you want to deport people based upon criminality, that's one thing. But to take this and make it a scope of just sending any and everybody of brown and black, etc., and throw them out of the country that they were born in. But yet exemptions are made to bring those from South Africa under the guise of, quote, racial discrimination. Well, I don't see any black people coming from South Africa to America. So the plausibility argument it is not infallible. It's time for people to think for themselves, read and understand. I constantly tell people, know what the Constitution says. Always trying to amend the Constitution to try to justify one's actions. I'll give you an example. What the Republican-led MAGA Congress just did, it's going to be felt around this nation. And many of the millions and millions of people who voted to put Trump back in office, you're going to feel it. Your Medicaid will be cut. Your food stamps will be taken away. Bit by bit, they'll try to strip your rights as well. Look at what's happening and going on down in Texas. It's horrendous. It's horrible. I've done 3 videos about it. And who are the people that are impacted by it? Mostly MAGA Republicans. And what did they do with FEMA? Shut it down or drastically reduced it to nothing. I'll get to you later on when I'm finished what I'm talking about here. In his ruling earlier this year, LaPlante said Trump's order contradicts the text of the 14th Amendment and the century-old untouched precedent that interprets it. Several other judges similarly ruled that Trump's order was unconstitutional. Their injunctions applied nationwide and prompted the administration to mount the series of appeals that eventually landed before the Supreme Court. Thursday's proceeding focused largely on the request from immigration rights attorneys who brought the legal challenge to LaPlante to certify a class of individuals that would include, quote, all current and future children, end quote, who would be affected by Trump's order and their parents. The judge's ruling Thursday did not include the parents in the class. The judge appeared sympathetic to arguments pushed by the Justice Department that certifying a class including the parents might run up against the federal rules regarding class certification if those adults each had immigration situations that were significantly different from another adult in the class. That statement I agree with. Because you cannot try to make it a blanketed order. DOJ attorney Eric Hamilton had wanted LaPlante to allow for discovery so more information could be gathered on the adults who are part of the legal challenge, but the judge, aware of the urgency of the litigation, noted that such court-ordered fact-finding wouldn't be feasible. You're right. Ordinarily, we'd conduct discovery before granting a class certification, LaPlante said. There's no time for discovery. His decision to keep the certified class somewhat narrow allows the case to proceed without that time-consuming process. Quote, I think that the class representatives present issues that the newborn infants do not, the judge said. Class action lawsuits, class representatives are individuals who, if the class is certified, will represent the class members. In this case, brought by the American Civil Liberties Union, those proposed representatives had included a Honduran asylum seeker, referred to in court papers as, quote, Barbara, end quote, and who was living in New Hampshire and expecting a baby in October, and a Brazilian man, referred to as, quote, Mark, end quote, who was attempting to get lawful permanent status. Mark's wife, who is not in the U.S. legally, gave birth in March. If the order is left in place, the ACLU lawyers wrote, those children will face numerous obstacles to life in the United States, including stigma and potential statelessness, loss of their right to vote, serve on federal juries and in many elected offices, and work in various federal jobs, ineligibility for various federal programs, and potential arrest, detention, and deportation to countries they may have never even seen. Signed by Trump on January 20, the executive order titled, quote, Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship, end quote, said that the federal government will not issue documents recognizing United States citizenship to any child born on American soil to parents who were in the country unlawfully or were in the states lawfully but temporarily. The Supreme Court said in its June 27 ruling that the administration cannot begin enforcing the order for 30 days, though the government is allowed to begin developing guidance on how the policy will be implemented. In the other challenges to Trump's order, lower courts around the country have asked the parties to submit written legal arguments addressing how the Supreme Court's ruling would impact the nationwide injunctions issued in those cases, and more recent proceedings are expected in the coming days and weeks. But that process will take time, and it's unclear whether any of those courts will narrow their injunctions ahead of when Trump is permitted to enforce the birthright policy. Well, it's going to be enforced. I think it's going to be. Quote, I feel like we're the only people who rushed around here, LaPlante quipped during Thursday's hearing, end quote. ACLU attorney Cody Wolfsby, in a statement, said the judge's decision is a huge victory and will help protect the citizenship of all children born in the United States as the Constitution intended. LaPlante's decision aligns with the Supreme Court's blockbuster ruling last month, which left class action litigation on the table as a way to block Trump's birthright citizenship order and potentially other policies. The Supreme Court's decision was focused on one type of court order, a nationwide injunction. But several other justices were keen to note that plaintiffs suing an administration would have other avenues to shut down policies that might run afoul of the Constitution or federal law. Writing for the majority, Justice Amy Coney Barrett suggests that the kind of class action litigation immigration rights groups are now pursuing may have advantages. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, a conservative who is often closer to the center of the court in high-profile cases, seemed especially open to having the Supreme Court review on an emergency basis exactly the kind of order LaPlante issued. Today, a decision on district court injunctions will not affect the court's vitally important responsibility to resolve applications for stays or injunctions with respect to major new federal state statutes and executive actions. Kavanaugh wrote, deciding those applications is not a distraction from our job. It is a critical part of our job. Perhaps Kavanaugh mused a district court might issue the functional equivalent of a universal injunction by granting or denying a preliminary injunction in a class action suit. No matter how the preliminary injunction litigation or those kinds of significant matters transpires in the district courts, the courts of appeals, in turn, will undoubtedly be called upon to promptly grant or deny temporary stays or temporary injunctions in many cases, Kavanaugh wrote. But LaPlante's ruling is nevertheless almost certain to force the justices to deal with the split that emerged over the particulars of those cases, and the court's majority opinion left that split unsettled. Several conservatives, including Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, warned against courts issuing class action litigation to essentially supplement the kind of nationwide injunction the court had just shot down. Lax enforcement of the requirements for certifying a class action, Alito wrote in an opinion, joined by Thomas, no brainer there, would create a potentially significant loophole to today's decision. Federal courts, he added, should thus be vigilant against such potential abuses of those tools. Whether LaPlante's decision is an abuse or exactly what the Supreme Court had in mind will likely wind up back before the justices in short order. So as you see, there's a lot going on here in the country. All right, let me look at some of these comments. Deepak Sharma. Okay, what's happening? How you doing? Capriano asks, it's my birthday. Can you sing me happy birthday? Are you serious? I can't sing happy birthday. Joe Higgins, correct. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. I'm going to take an extended break, and I'll be back later on. Never surrender. Never quit.